Hey, and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about stimulus check numero dos and the top 5 ways that you can spend it. 2 years of college Spanish. That's all of it. There's been talk of a potential stimulus check for months now. I'm not here to debate the politics of it or the likelihood of whether or not we're going to get one. What I do want to talk about today is from a personal finance perspective, what you should do with the money if we were to get a second stimulus check. Before we get started, let me know in the comments down below with the first round of stimulus checks, if you did get one, what did you do with that money? This video doesn't just apply to the stimulus check if we were to get one, but it also applies to any windfall that you might receive in your lifetime. So the first thing that you should do if we're to get a second stimulus check is emergency fund. If you don't already have a fully funded emergency fund, this is exactly where I'd start. Given the current state of the U.S. economy and the unemployment rate, now is an excellent time to start building your emergency fund. An emergency fund typically consists of 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. However, if you have a job where you may have a higher likelihood of losing your job, or you may not have clients for a long period of time, then you might want to consider your individual situation and maybe have up to 12 months of an emergency fund, which is crazy, and that's more than what most people need. But just depending on your industry, how long you might be able to work for, take that into consideration. Don't just go with 3 months. If you're more likely to be able to work for 8 months, then you're going to want to save 8 months worth of expenses. But just to be clear, anything over 6 months of expenses is overboard for a lot of people. So you need to make sure you consider your individual situation. An emergency fund should be kept in a different location from your normal checkings or savings account. Consider opening an account in a completely different bank if you think you may have self-control issues or might have a hard time not dipping into that money for anything other than an emergency. Putting that emergency fund in a different bank really helps reduce the temptation to dip into that for anything other than an emergency. It's very much so out of sight, out of mind. This is what I do, so I'm not knocking anyone for having self-control issues. The second thing that you should do if we get a stimulus check is pay off your high interest rate debt. So if you already have an emergency fund fully funded or mostly fully funded, pay off your high interest rate debt. So most likely that would be credit card debt. Now, Dave Ramsey would not be thrilled with me that I'm putting this as number 2 on my list, but the reason is that lower credit card debt cannot pay your mortgage or put food on the table. So for that reason, I think the emergency fund, especially given the current situation, I think that the emergency fund should be the first priority to make sure that you've got a backup in the event that you get laid off. That said, it's extremely important to pay off high interest debts such as credit cards. That way you can build your wealth more aggressively. So any kind of windfall that you might receive, you should definitely put toward paying this down. The average American household has $6,124 worth of credit card debt, and the average interest rate of that debt is 17.99%. 17.99%. That's insane. Good luck finding an investment that will pay you 17.99%. And if you know of one, please let me know because I would like to invest in it. If you only pay the minimum monthly payment on this balance of $6,124, that means you'll pay $8,600 in interest. You're paying more in interest than the balance on that credit card. More in interest on the balance of that credit card. That is insane. That's $8,600 that could be going toward building your own wealth. This is why it's so important to get rid of high interest debt, because that $8,600 in interest could be going toward funding your Roth IRA, building your wealth, and setting you up for financial success in the future. Speaking of Roth IRAs, that leads me into number 3, funding your retirement savings. If you've got a fully funded emergency fund and you've paid off your high interest debt, then put this money into retirement savings, more specifically a Roth IRA. Don't have a Roth IRA? Open one today. It only takes a few minutes, and you can contribute up to $6,000 per year, and every little bit of interest that accrues in that account over time, you can withdraw tax-free at $59.50. That's a pretty sweet deal. Since there's a yearly contribution limit, it's super important that you try to max this out every year if you're financially able to do so. Because once that year is gone, you can't get it back, and that's $6,000 less of retirement savings that you would have. That's a lot of compound interest that you're losing out on over the years. All right, moving on to number 4. If you've already funded your emergency fund, paid off your high interest debt, and maxed out your Roth IRA, put it in a taxable brokerage. If you've already done the 3 prior things I mentioned, then put your money into a low-fee index fund within a taxable brokerage. You won't get the same tax advantages like you would with the Roth IRA, so you will have to pay taxes if you take the money out, but you're still going to be able to grow your wealth over time with compound interest, which is a great thing. Investing in a taxable brokerage is something that we still want to look at as a long-term investment, similar to saving for retirement. One of the reasons we want to look at this from a long-term perspective is because of long-term capital gains. Long-term capital gains are an investment that have been held for more than a year, and it's taxed at a far more favorable rate than short-term capital gains. Short-term capital gains are investments that have been held for less than a year and are taxed as ordinary income. Well, if you've made it this far, thank you. We are at lucky number 5. Nobody says that. So here we are. We made it to the end. It's been a wild ride talking about personal finance. Last but not least, you could donate the money. Obviously, a lot of people are struggling right now, and if you're someone who's been fortunate enough to not have been as affected by this situation, or at least financially, consider donating the money to either a cause of your choice or maybe a local food bank. If you put your money into any of these 5 places, you really can't go wrong. But I did put these in order of what I think is most important to least important for your financial goals. Now, just because it's number 5, and I did order this from most to least important for your own personal finances, this does not mean that donating is not extremely important. But from your own personal financial standpoint, so just for your personal finances, you can't give what you don't have. So that's why this ended up being number 5 on the list, but that does not mean that it's not extremely important. Let me know in the comments down below what you would do with money from a second stimulus check. Would you buy PS5? Would you use it to support your local businesses and restaurants? Do any of the 5 things that I mentioned below? And if there's anything you think I missed that I should have added to the list, definitely let me know. And thanks. Until next time.